All right, I think we've given everyone enough time to zip right in. Welcome all to the March agent update from Cannasure. I'm Jim McErlean, Business Development, and I'm excited to share the stage today with Stuart Worthington of Benchmark Workers' Compensation Insurance. Howdy to Stu.
I'm good.
I'll be introducing Stu in a second here, but let's take a peek at today's agenda, if I can. And of course, there we go. I'm going to tackle the first part of our webinar today. I'm going to share some MGA program updates with everybody. Excited to announce a streamlined renewal process for our MGA, and then share a little bit of claims information, some stats, a couple of claims, live examples that hopefully will be interesting. Because obviously the whole point of the world of insurance is to be there at time of claim. And we're proud of our relationship with Topa Insurance Company and their claims operations. And we've had real life examples where, agents are asking us about coverage. Clients are asking us when's their claim could be paid, and we've had many, many positive outcomes. So happy to touch on that. Then I'll be handing it off to Stuart Worthington. Stu is the Director of Marketing and Vice President at Benchmark, Treon, and American Liberty, where we've shared some of their logos throughout the presentation. So you can get an idea of branding and who all these companies are, as we refer to them as Benchmark in general, but there's a lot more to the story behind the scenes, and Stu's going to touch on that for us as well. And then at the end, we've got a kind of a two-part Q&A. The first Q, if you will, is going to be our attempts to solicit some ideas that you have for us for our MGA program. The other part of the maybe Q2 is just live questions that both Stu and I will be here to answer on behalf of our respective programs. But at the end of the day, what we don't answer live, we will be able to respond back with the housekeeping part of our presentation, which is sending you the spreadsheet of all questions that come in, sending you copies of all the slides. We have a couple of attachments that we're going to send you, and then the live recording as well. So you'll get all of that as we conclude, hopefully sometime later today, maybe tomorrow. On behalf of Zoom, you'll have a button below on the bottom of your screen that should say Q&A. That is the place to memorialize your questions, because that will follow through a spreadsheet. So if we can make sure that all the questions come in there, and then we'll try to answer live the ones that are pertinent to today, and then we'll just grab the ones that are about our program's future. So that's that. That's how we're going to talk about our March agent webinar today. And let's get right into it. As you guys know, you've been hanging out with me on these webinars for a couple of years now. You know that I love to brag about Cannasure's MGA program. Our flagship MGA is on Sutton National Paper, Sutton Specialty Paper, Topa Insurance Company, and Dorchester Insurance Company, all of which are underwritten by our underwriting team behind the scenes. And we've continued to negotiate higher and higher property capacities over the course of the last 4 years running. I think we started with $10 million per location, and now we get to brag about our $45 million per location capacity. And what's important to know here, as I have per location bolded and italicized, is that we define a location with 100-foot spread. So if you have two different buildings that are 105 feet apart, that's two locations. And that means everything that's happening in each building in terms of industry property, business income, the real property, the BPP, all of that can start to add up to a lot more than $45 million. So there's a couple of accounts that we write today that we could have $90 million, $135 million in a small area, but we consider those multiple locations. to the naked eye or to the common person, that might look like one location, but it's actually multiple locations. So we want to make sure that you think about the ISO definition of how a location is defined, which is 100 feet spread. Next, we want to reinforce the fact that we do monoline coverages. So I put here monoline property, but we can also do monoline casualty, monoline products liability, monoline premise liability. But most often we've been writing monoline property, and in the state of Michigan, because they have some really interesting general liability laws out that way. But don't hesitate to look at Cannasure as a monoline property market. And in fact, we are just about to bind up a nice one in California that is believed to be Admiral on the general liability and Cannasure on the property coverages. So that's an opportunity. Of course, we love to write a package, but that doesn't mean we can't carve it up and write some monoline coverages. And then we just recently had a webinar a few months ago that touched on the launch of our excess casualty product, as well as reinforcing our excess property product. And I would be remiss if I didn't touch on those again. Most importantly, for the excess casualty program, it is a $5 million limit, excess of $5 million or excess of $10 million. In other words, we don't incrementalize our excess cover. So we don't do $1 million excess of 5 or $2 million excess of 10. It's 5x of 5, 5x of 10. It is very, very competitively priced. So just because you're buying a bit more coverage, you're not going to feel it. The customer's not going to feel it. It's that competitive. So let's make sure we put a lot more casualty limits out there for our larger customers. And specifically, Cannasure at renewal is going to just offer you a $5 million excess quote on any account that we have an underlying $5 million on. And then moving on to excess property. We've been at this for now 5-6 months or so. We recently wrote an account 20 million, excess of 20 million. There's a handful of accounts where we write $10 million of property, excess of $20 million, which kind of is the industry norm. A lot of our competitors have a $20 million underlying capacity opportunity or offering in property, and we can go excess of them. We can go 20 excess of 20, 5 excess of 20, 10 million excess of 20. But the point there is that we can carve up excess property, unlike excess casualty. We've been growing with all the new states as they come on board. We know there's been some recent laws happening in Maryland, Connecticut, Maine, New York, and New Jersey have been slow to come around, but we're in all of those states. So the Cannasure flagship MGA will continue to add new states. Alabama's coming on board soon. We added Louisiana recently. We added the state of Mississippi recently. So we'll continue to expand in the world of cannabis as it goes. But here's one that we always seem to get the mystery or the myth of that we need to definitely dispel. We do have an assault and battery exclusion in the ISO form of the Cannasure MGA, but it's not an absolute exclusion because we can offer a buyback. And that's always a point of contention. Maybe it's our competitors speaking to that we don't offer A and B. And in fact, I'm going to share a claims example where we had some coverage there and how the claim got resolved. But you have the ability to buy back assault and battery coverage up to $1 million on the primary policy. And then you can also sublimit that. You could buy back $100,000. You can buy back $250,000. So there's a lot of options within A and B. So, please understand that there might be more than meets the eye relative to our specimen policies, which we probably shared with you in the past. And then one of the hotter topics out there are consumption lounges. And we know they've been popping up in Nevada, or about to, California, Michigan, state of New York's talking about some consumption lounges. And Cannasure is there with you. We will offer a premises liability cover for consumption lounges. And if you're familiar with, let's just say, bars and taverns and any other places that sell liquor, The premise liability is there on the regular GL policy, but the dram shop liability component of the coverage necessary is usually a standalone liquor liability policy. We anticipate that'll be the same conversation in cannabis. So we are not looking to follow dram shop liability at this time, but we are providing coverage for the location itself. So the consumption lounge can welcome their new patrons and have a great experience for those who are either new to cannabis or new to a consumption lounge. And then the piece de resistance. But let me get some water first. I'm going to say this is our second most exciting topic today, because obviously Stu's benchmark presentation is going to be number one. But this is our big announcement today on a streamlined renewal process. I'm going to try to give you a quick snapshot. I don't have a picture for you, but in your mind's eye, what we're going to do is send you effectively what looks to be our proposal. So you'll see limits, and we've added a page or two of questions that are basically sharing what operational updates do you need to share with us, so we are on the spot with the next renewal period. So obviously 2022 is expiring, 2023 is coming forward. Do we have new locations? Do we have new additional insureds? Do we have updated limits? Do we have updated sales? So those are the questions that are going to be populated in this renewal solicitation to you. We're not asking for a new app. We are only asking for pertinent information that might have a premium impact to the renewal. We're targeting June renewals. Might be a slight disconnect, and we might need to push it to July because we're right on top of that timing. But our goal is to recognize we spent a lot of time earning your business on the front end as new business to Cannasure. We should make the renewal process much simpler, much more efficient, and treat it like it is an account that we want to keep, not to ask for it to be like a new business submission. So we're almost like we're stepping into the standard market for cannabis. Not quite there, but we're getting close, and you should start to see what that template looks like in terms of what the renewal questions will be. So excited about this. You'll see it shortly. Please, share with us when you see this for the first time, what other questions you might want to have asked by us, because maybe there's other things you guys do in preparation for renewal that maybe we didn't anticipate. Let's talk to claims for a brief minute, and then we'll kick it off to Stu. One thing that we've identified are a handful of trends, both on the severity side and the frequency side. So when we say this is one insurance company's experience over 5 years, that would be Cannasure. And what we've noticed, and you probably have felt some of our pain on the fire losses as they are derived by lighting issues, which I think we also speak to in a second. The severity dollar is 65% of the losses we've paid have been due to effectively lighting fires. On the flip side, the frequency, number one, in terms of a claims activity, has been robbery, theft, and vandalism. You can attest most of that to, the civil unrest of 2020, and then it just continues on. Unfortunately, it's almost been like that door opened and we haven't shut it as tightly as we should have in terms of, slowing down civil unrest and, theft, robbery, and vandalism. But it is our most frequent area of claims activity. But most interestingly, and Kieran O'Rourke speaks to this every chance he gets, our most unique claim, and it's becoming an occurrence, are cars driving into buildings. It's one of our top 5 highest claims that we've had, and it's been, I think, 3 or 4 times over now. So it's becoming both a severity issue and a frequency issue. So you'll start to see us when we talk about risk management topics. Are there some kind of barricades in front of the front door, or some sensitive building areas where you don't want a car to be driving right through your building? It's legit and it's happened. Speaking to a couple of specific claims. I mentioned assault and battery. I was going to tease up. We had a claim where we had a limited A and B cover buyback. And the question was, because the assault happened in the parking lot, was that going to be a coverage trigger? And it was far enough away that it didn't seem to be related to the facility, because there was multiple tenants that were housed in the same parking lot. But the claimant was clearly going there for cannabis purchasing. And we looked at what was the intent of the cover for why did the customer buy assault and battery buyback. And we made sure that we settled that claim in a fair way to the claimant, because the reason why they were there was to be a consumer to our cannabis client, and it triggered assault and battery coverage. Most times, the best way to talk about claims is what was the intent of the underwriter when they offered up the coverage and offered a price for it. In this case, the intent was pretty clear that the customer wanted assault and battery cover for the time a customer was on their parking lot, in their facility, and then on their way back home. We've shared with you what the exclusion looks like if you haven't seen the ISO form for assault and battery. And then we've also shared with you here the limited cover buyback endorsement. We can send you full page of this if you'd like, but it's pretty ISO standard, so it should be easy to find out there. Next claim had an after hours break-in. So we're triggering theft coverage and then having to look at the safeguard endorsement of the policy. And what was the intent? What did the client share with us in terms of how they were providing a safe place for the industry product? And were they locking it up overnight, which is what the policy says, which is what the client says they were doing, which becomes a warranty to our policy. Let me show you a copy of what they said was a safe. That refrigerator, which doesn't have a lock on it. So what we did, as I go back here, is that you'll see that we had a partial acceptance of coverage. Because at the end of the day, if the client has all of their inventory out without it being locked up, there's a coverage discussion about 25% of the inventory, is allowed to be at risk at the premise location. And that was how we looked at this outcome, was that they were going to have some coverage on the floor, just because it's hard to say that you can put everything away every evening if you have good security systems, good safes, good vaults, and what are you doing with your locked or not locked refrigerators? So the outcome was a partial acceptance of the coverage, partial denial of coverage, because as you see, that doesn't look like a safe to me. I'm sure you guys can understand the outcome of such a claim. And then you guys know that we ultimately have policy conditions that speak to what is completed stock, what's a safe, and these are all part of the policy renewal discussions or policy negotiation discussions on the front end for new business, and then of course at renewal, on what the client told us, what you as our agents told us on what were the security measures, and that becomes a warranty to the policy. I think every cannabis company out there has one. And then of course they're defined as protective safeguards. And here's a list of a handful of those protective safeguards that become defined in the policy. And then I believe finally I'm at all of the different lighting systems issues. We've had our fair share, as I indicated on the severity claims, of fires due to high intensity discharge bulbs, metal halide bulbs, high pressure sodium bulbs, and the fact that there might be two of those bulbs on the same ballast, and then that triggers an arc, triggers a fire. And what are the other things that we can do to talk about how to safeguard a grow facility from misplaced lighting bulbs? the use of LED bulbs, perhaps, maintenance of existing lighting systems. What are all the different risk management techniques the client's taking to ensure there is no fire or no arcing that causes a fire in their grow facilities. We're going to spend a lot more time going forward in our risk management efforts to talk about lighting systems and are they acceptable to the grow operation? And then, of course, are they acceptable from a insurance perspective? And then here was a case where we did have one of those things blow, took out a whole plant full of plants, paid the claim, and then our experience with this process was the education of how do we share the information back to the policyholders and then, of course, to you guys as agents. And that has been the creation of a lighting supplement to ask those questions to better understand what are our potential exposures when we're looking at a cultivation operation. So that's Jim McErlean speaking, but now more importantly, we got Stuart Worthington speaking. So Stu's going to bring a conversation forward on benchmarks, appetites, their cannabis practice, the fact that they've been in the cannabis space for quite some time and have been our strongest brokerage partner across my time at Cannasure for the last 3 years. Thrilled that Benchmark has been such a great partner to us. And in fact, Stu and I are both going to Boston by tomorrow to be at NECAN. So it's that tight of a partnership where we have a carrier partner that wants to join us at a trade show and share the good stories that we both have to share. Now it's Stu's time. Mr. Worthington, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. So first and foremost, I wanted to just kind of cover a little bit about us as a company. The Treon Companies was founded back in 1996. They purchased Benchmark Insurance Company in 2008, and then they acquired American Liberty Insurance Company in 2017. American Liberty was founded in 2004 as a monoline workers' comp company. And, so between Benchmark and American Liberty, we write on 2 papers with our agency partners. Benchmark is licensed in 49 states. All states we offer workers' comp monoline product, except the state of New York. And that's a state we probably will never entertain going into just because of the litigious nature in that state. But again, like Jim said, we've been in the cannabis space. We wrote, I believe, our first cannabis policy in 2016, back when nobody wanted to touch cannabis or marijuana, as it was called back then. So we kind of saw that as a stupid rationale and began writing policies in the space, whether it was hemp and cannabis or a variety of the products that are byproducts of the cannabis plants. We've been doing that now for almost 7 years. So we feel like we've kind of been on the tip of the spear there as far as writing in cannabis in that space. We don't just write cannabis. Obviously, we have a pretty broad appetite for risk in the monoline market. So whether it's cannabis related or not, we really write a lot of monoline work comp all over the United States. Benchmark is also a fronted carrier that has roughly 22 programs that vary from tow truck operations to tree trimming to whatever. Out in the marketplace, you'll bump into the Benchmark name. But for the intents and purposes of our relationship, I manage and direct the direct written guaranteed cost premium in the United States through a host of directly appointed independent agency avenues. We've been in partnership with Cannasure now going on 3 years, and it's been a really good partnership for us. We do have a limited access in the marketplace. We have less than 400 direct appointed contracts throughout the United States, and that's by design. We're kind of big on relationship, and we've got a great relationship with Jim and his team there. And so we feel like limiting access to our product builds value to our brand, builds value to the Cannasure brand. So, you know, with that being said, we are monoline workers comp. We feel like we're monoline ninja experts when it comes to workers comp. It's the only product we offer, and so we take great pride in doing it better than anyone else. So we kind of underwrite our policies. Some, depending on how old you are, might say the old-fashioned way. We actually use human beings to analyze and evaluate the risk and the exposures in any given account. Some of the differences in how we approach business, the why we do what we do, really is driven towards what's the owner of the entity's attitude towards safety towards their employees, what kind of risk management practices do they engage in with their employees? Do they have full-time loss control and risk safety people on staff? As a carrier, we have a robust department that is dedicated to risk management and loss control. And actually, we have a marketing product or program out there for our clients that is called the Safety Bucks program, where we collaborate with our insureds as a carrier and as a partner with them to engage in safety, and we foot the bill on some of that stuff. So we feel like that kind of sets us apart as a unique feather in our cap, if you will, to stuff as we try to think outside the box and helping our clients be safe in the work site. As a carrier, the AM Best is we're A-rated by AM Best. Both carriers, American Liberty and Benchmark Insurance Company, are rated AM Best A-rated. And a couple of things we do different. We offer multi-state policies. We offer combinable entities. So if you have, you know, a company that you're looking to quote, and they have operations in 32 states in the US, and they've got multiple entities and tax IDs that are all commonly owned, we can write one policy for the whole thing, where obviously a lot of the other carriers don't like to put it all under one policy. We frequently will do that. We work together with NCCI in making sure that those policies are issued, the unit stats are recorded. And for a lot of the more complicated accounts, it's a real time saver, and it brings a lot of value there. So to talk specifically about the risks in the cannabis space, like I said, we've been doing it for a while, and it's been interesting to see how cannabis has kind of morphed over the last 6 or 7 years. When we first started writing cannabis, there was no class code specific to marijuana. NCCI didn't have anything to track. Where that's kind of changed now. There are predominantly 9 primary class codes that are used in the industry. And I thought I would just touch base on a couple of those. Class code 0035 is florist and cultivating gardening. And what that really means in terms of cultivating and gardening is you're looking at cannabis buds are considered flowers by NCCI. So cannabis cultivation can be outdoor or indoor. Typically it's hydroponic. There's a variety of different ways that clients farm this stuff. In 2016, NCCI actually came out with the definition inside the florist code to include the use of the word marijuana, which was a big step forward. And then in 2021, they changed it to cannabis, which also includes hemp and the growing of hemp. As a side note, in California, almost 100% of all the hemp or cannabis is grown for CBD oil extraction. Industrial hemp fibers typically imported from outside of the US. You have class code 0035 or 0005, which is nurseries, which is the propagation and cultivation of nursery stock. So the little seedlings that get grown. There's a NCCI code that cannabis falls under that nursery code for that. Now you have cannabis processing, which is going to include 0035, the florist code, and then it's also going to have the code 4611, which is drug, medicine, or pharmaceutical preparation manufacturing. And what does that mean? Well, that really encompasses the compounding and blending and packaging of the cannabis product. Packaging buds in plastic baggies is considered drug, medicine, pharmaceutical, that 4611 code. The next thing you have is cannabis products manufacturing, which is not processing. Manufacturing, that 4611 code is that code, and that predominantly includes like the production of rolled cigarettes, manufacturing of the cannabinoid oil, the CBD products. The oil extraction piece falls under that code. Manufacturing of concentrates or tinctures or extracts or hashish or vape products all falls under that 4611 code, which is the drug, medicine, pharmaceutical preparation, not manufacturing, but preparation. You have 6504, which is food products manufacturing. And that code, we get into, the edibles. What's interesting is that they separated that code for gummy bears and stuff like that. The food products manufacturing code is not what they use for brownies and baked goods. There's a bakery code, and that code is 2003. Cracker manufacturing, bakeries, anything that where the cannabis infused in a baked good falls under the 2003 code. You have a 2163 code, which is bottling. So if your clients are bottling cannabis infused beverages, then there's a separate code for that. You have sales and licensing, which is the retail stores, the dispensaries out there. And Jim, you mentioned these new lounges would fall into this 8017 or 8045 code, where it's basically the clients retailing to the customers. They walk onto the property. Retail outlets that perform packaging of individual orders, final trimming, cigarettes, that kind of stuff, that all falls into the retail code. And then our favorite code, 7198, is the new hot buzz button out there, and that's the cannabis delivery code. Parcel delivery, messenger service companies, contact deliveries, Uber, small parcels, armored transport services also falls under the delivery code 7198. Secure transport of cash, valuables, including the drivers, the money sorters, the counters, the vault clerks, the security guards, all that stuff falls under the cannabis delivery code. I know it's weird, but that's NCCI for you. And then the other related codes that we see on a workers' comp policy with the cannabis operation is an analytical testing and laboratory code, which is 4511. And that's it, depending on some states, for example, California, for you to sell cannabis there, you have to test it before you can sell it. So there's a lot of companies out there that do the analytical testing, and those fall under the 4511 code. There is a security guard or patrol service code, which is different than the armed transport in the security guard patrol service code 7720. I've yet to be at a cannabis facility, whether it was a retail outlet or a actual plant or a grow, where they didn't have 75 secret, ex-Marine recon dudes decked to the halt with lots of guns and ammo. Those guys all fall into the 7720 guard code. And then the last code is the 9424 code, which is garbage or refuse landfill transfer station. And that's for the disposal of any byproducts, trimming, or green waste. 9424. So that's kind of a brief rundown on the work comp piece. Those are the codes we use. Those are the codes that fall in. Some clients we've experienced where they don't believe that their operation should fall under this code or that code. We've got a very experienced team of underwriters here that have direct pipelines to NCCI. And, I think of worthy of note is that if you have a client that feels they're miscoded or coded, classified wrong based on their operation, at any given time during the year, whether it's at their ARD date, their anniversary, their renewal, the client can request an inspection from NCCI to come out, look at their operation. And we're happy to also, as a carrier, we can request those inspections if you have a client that's specific to that. But Those are kind of the highlights in the cannabis space as we've seen those codes develop over time. I think we'll see more codes come around as the operations and the cannabis world continues to change and develop. But as a carrier, that's kind of in our world what we do and how we do it. We underwrite accounts on their own merits. We look at their loss history. We ask the question, why did that happen? How did it happen? What have they done to change that in the future? We look at, just like James touched on the claim side, the frequency and the severity issues. What's driving the claims? How are they being driven? How is the frequency being handled? What do they have in place? What kind of safety procedures, policy procedures? And we like working with clients that are interested in engaging with us as a carrier partner to help them be safe in the workplace. So that's kind of in a crash course nutshell, who we are, what we do. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Cool. Stu, thanks so much. And we do have a couple of questions. I'm going to do it in reverse order since the first couple are on behalf of workers' compensation. And one question was, are we going to get a list of those class codes emailed? And Stu and I talked about this as we prepared for the webinar today. We're going to send out Benchmark's Safety Bucks program to everybody. We're going to send out Stu's talking points on the class codes. We're going to send out the Cannasure lighting supplement because that's a big issue to make sure everyone has that handy. And then we're going to send the slides. So you'll receive all 4 of those, as well as either a copy of the recording of today's webinar or a link to go find it will direct you to our website. I forget that point, but either way, you'll have access to that. But Stu, direct question to you was, class code 4825 is extraction and 4611 is without extraction, with 6504 being edibles, but not baked goods. Does that sound correct?
Wow, that's a lot. So 4825 extraction. Let's just reference my list because there's no way I have all this memorized.
And Lindsay, thank you for your question.
Okay. So when we talk about, where's my code here?
Because processing and extraction should be equivalent.
So 4611 includes the production, compounding, blending, and packaging of drugs. That's not extraction.
Correct.
4611.
Right.
And then, let's see, she has 6504. In my little presentation, I didn't have these all in order. Okay, 6504 is food products manufacturing.
Right.
Which is not baked goods.
Right. It would be edibles, but not
Edibles, not baked goods. That is
right.
Correct.
Right. And the baked goods would be 2003 bakery.
Bakery, correct.
So I think Lindsay's got it right. And then
yes, that sounds correct. Yes.
Perfect. Well, cool. And then a question that I'm going to grab from Nick is our property capacity and how it breaks down. So we do have $45 million per location max. So if we have the underlying at 45 mil, we cannot offer excess property cover because that would be stacking limits and that would put us over $45 million. So when we do look at an excess property submission, we do check the address because there are times where we might insure the operator and have, let's say, $5 or $6 million of property capacity already on the account. And then somebody submits the landlord or the LRO submission, and we got to make sure that the max total TIV is $45 million or under at that location. So we're good at cross-referencing accounts to the address to make sure we're not overstepping our $45 million in capacity. So Nick, thank you. Good question. We've typically written excess property over top our competition. We haven't done it over top Cannasure. And then to clarify, we will offer excess casualty over Cannasure and all of our competition. But property works a little bit differently because it is a hard cap of 45 mil. And I believe those are our questions. So, Stu, one thing I wanted to reinforce on Benchmark's behalf, and a great area of Cannasure's success has been writing multi-state policies. So we've had, I think 1 or 2 of our policies have 5 or 6 states on them. And that is, to me, a Benchmark trademark. It is something that has gone very well for us, because if you look at some of the other competitors of workers' compensation, they either do not have multi-state capacity, or they're already in a state fund, which oftentimes is limited to that one state. Stu, I don't know if you want to add to the multi-state conversation.
Well, that's exactly right. One of the great things that we've been able to do, having the Benchmark paper in the 49 states, is write a single policy for a client that has locations sprawling all over the US. And what that does is it means that the client only has one premium audit. Yeah. Not a premium audit for every state that they're in. We do one premium audit for the policy that includes all the states that they have listed on the policy. So in terms of simplifying, making the owner's life easier, that's a huge thing. And then, on our policies on the payment schedule side, those clients that are larger and more sophisticated, we offer monthly reporting. So they can monthly report directly through our client portal, their payroll and the class codes by wage, which makes, when they go to audit the policy, it's really super simple, because we just take what they reported and verify it with what they reported to the IRS, and it's over. So it's not a long, drawn out process. Having one policy with all the states eliminates the individual audit per state hoops that clients have historically had to go through, because A, it was hard to get coverage, A, and B, then you had to get coverage in every state where you're opening an operation. Yep. And so to be able to lump those or ball them all up into one policy that covers the multiple states eliminates a lot of back end work for the owners.
Yeah. And then you just jumped right on top of the next thing I was going to discuss, which is Benchmark's capacity to write on a pay-as-you-go / monthly pay reporting, whatever terminology is there. So that is something that is available because of Benchmark's, policy administration, that they can offer monthly payroll reporting with a small deposit instead of installments. So some of our clients and really agents have taken advantage of that flexibility.
Correct.
So I think we're good. We've got it to 44 minutes. We were thinking 45 minutes today, so we're going to finish right under the wire, a minute to go. As I promised, we might have one more. Benchmark is in Missouri, correct, Stu?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So Mary, and thank you, Mary Woods, for the handful of questions in advance. We're going to answer those, on the side. The only state Benchmark is not in is New York, as Stu mentioned. So we're able to write policies in 49 other states in a single policy.
Correct.
One of the teases I had was the need to try to solicit more coverage opportunities in the Cannasure MGA. So for those of you who don't have my contact info, it is right there. I'll leave that on the screen for a second, and I'm sure that I'll use my contact information to send out all the things that we promised. Final question goes out to Mary with, yes, we can write a multi-entity with one EIN on one policy, but it has to have the commonality of ownership. So in the NCCI world, it's called combinability. And as long as the ownership group has 50.1% or more ownership, then you can write all of those on a single policy. Did I miss anything, Stu?
No, that's exactly correct.
Yeah.
We have several policies like that where they depending on the states they're in, they file a new entity because of the state licensure requirements. But it's all the same owner, so we can list those owners and those entities all on one policy for multiple states.
Yeah.
Correct. That is correct. We do that.
Cool. Well, again, everybody, thank you for joining our March agent updates. And Stu, thank you for your time today and knowledge that you're dropping on us. We will get everything out to everybody, and we appreciate your support for Cannasure and our trading partners in Benchmark. Let's go write some business in 2023. Thanks, everybody.